Ambassador Krikstar adjusted his ceremonial robes as the shuttle approached Earth's orbital station. The massive structure spun slowly against the backdrop of the blue planet below. He had seen many worlds in his 40 years of diplomatic service, but Earth still looked primitive compared to the crystal cities of his homeworld. "First time meeting humans, Ambassador?" asked his aide, clicking her claws nervously. "Yes," Krikstar replied, studying the data pad in his scaled hands. "The Galactic Council has avoided formal contact for decades. Their reputation precedes them. The reports made for disturbing reading. Humans had fought brutal wars across their own planet for thousands of years. Even after reaching space, they had turned their colonies into battlegrounds. The images from their world wars showed destruction on a scale that made most civilized species uncomfortable. They say humans smile when they plan to kill you," his aide whispered. Krikstar dismissed such gossip with a wave of his hand. He prided himself on being logical and fair. Every species deserved a chance to prove themselves worthy of joining. The Galactic Council, even humans. The docking bay was clean and well organized. Krikstar expected chaos, but everything ran smoothly. Human workers moved cargo with quiet efficiency. No shouting, no arguments. "Strange. Ambassador Krikstar?" A human approached with measured steps. He was tall and lean, wearing a simple dark uniform. "I am Park Ji-woo, Chief Diplomatic Officer for Earth. Welcome to our home." The human's face was calm and pleasant. Krikstar had read that humans showed emotions through facial expressions, but Ji-woo's features revealed nothing beyond polite interest. "Thank you for receiving me," Krikstar replied in perfect human English. "I look forward to our discussions." A woman stepped forward beside Ji-woo. She was shorter, but carried herself like a warrior. "Kim Nari, military advisor," she said simply. "I hope your journey was comfortable." Krikstar studied them both. These were not the savage brutes described in the intelligence reports. They seemed civilized. Perhaps the reports were exaggerated. The tour began in the station's main corridor. Everything was functional but pleasant. The humans they passed nodded respectfully but did not stare or cluster around the alien visitor. Again, Krikstar found their behavior surprisingly refined. "Your station is well maintained," he commented as they walked. "We believe in taking care of what serves us well," Ji-woo replied. "Would you like to see our cultural center first, or shall we begin with the formal presentations?" "Cultural center, please. I find it helps to understand a species through their art." The cultural center was a large, bright space filled with displays from human history. Krikstar moved slowly through the exhibits, his aide taking notes. Paintings, sculptures, music, literature, all the marks of a civilized people. But then he reached the war memorials. The displays were tasteful, but detailed. Images of battlefields, weapons, soldiers. What struck Krikstar was not the violence itself. Many species had violent periods in their past. It was how the humans presented it. There was no shame, no apology. The displays described tactics, strategies, casualties with the same calm tone used for describing poetry or music, as if war was simply another form of human expression. "This battle was particularly clever," Nari said, stopping beside a holographic display showing troops moving across a landscape. The commander convinced the enemy they were retreating, then trapped them in a valley with no escape. "Many died?" Krikstar asked. "Oh yes. Almost 50,000 in a single day." Nari smiled slightly. "But it ended the war 2 years early. Probably saved more lives in the long run." The smile. There it was. Krikstar felt his scales prickle slightly. Nari had smiled while discussing mass death, as if it were a solved mathematical problem. "You seem comfortable discussing such events," he observed carefully. Ji-woo joined them, hands clasped behind his back. "Our past shapes who we are, Ambassador. We do not hide from it or pretend it did not happen. Violence was often necessary for survival." "Was?" Krikstar asked. "Is," Ji-woo corrected smoothly. "The universe can be a dangerous place. We have learned to be dangerous in return when needed." They moved to the next section, which focused on human exploration and colonization. Again, the presentations were matter of fact. Planets surveyed, resources claimed, native species encountered, and managed. This world had a primitive intelligence, Jiwoo explained, pointing to one display. Simple tool users like your early ancestors might have been millions of years ago. What happened to them? They adapted to serve useful purposes. We helped them develop better agriculture, medicine, technology. In return, they provide resources and labor. Everyone benefits. Krikstar's aide made a note. The arrangement sounded reasonable enough, but something in Jiwoo's tone suggested there was more to the story. The tour continued to the technology section. Human engineering was impressive but not extraordinary. They had achieved faster-than-light travel later than most species, and their computers were adequate but not remarkable. What caught Krikstar's attention was their focus on adaptation and modification. We specialize in taking existing designs and improving them, Nari explained. Learning what works, what doesn't, and how to make it better. Your own innovations? We innovate by combining ideas from different sources, Jiwoo said. Why start from scratch when you can build on what others have already learned? They paused at a display showing various alien technologies that humans had encountered and adapted. Ship designs, weapon systems, communication devices, all modified with human improvements. How do you acquire these alien technologies? Krikstar asked. Trade mostly, Nari replied. Sometimes salvage from old battlefields. Occasionally, species share their knowledge when they realize the benefits of cooperation. And if they do not wish to cooperate? Jiwoo and Nari exchanged a quick glance. Most species eventually see the advantages of working together, Jiwoo said calmly. That evening, Krikstar attended a formal dinner with the human leadership. The food was excellent, the conversation polite. The humans asked thoughtful questions about Galactic Council procedures and member species. They seemed genuinely interested in joining the galactic community. But as the night went on, Krikstar began to notice patterns in their questions. They wanted to know about Council military capabilities, trade routes, internal politics, resource distribution among member worlds. When he mentioned his own species' technological advantages, Nari leaned forward with interest. Your crystal-based computing systems must be incredibly efficient. I would love to learn more about their design principles. Perhaps we could arrange some form of cultural exchange, Jiwoo added. Human students learning from your scientists, your people seeing our innovations, mutual benefit. It all sounded reasonable. Friendly even, but Krikstar found himself growing uneasy. The humans' questions were too specific, too focused, like predators studying their prey. As the dinner ended, Krikstar walked with Jiwoo toward his guest quarters. The corridor was quiet, most of the station's crew asleep. I must admit, Krikstar said, you are not what I expected from the intelligence reports. Oh? What did you expect? Chaos, violence, primitive behavior. Jiwoo stopped walking and turned to face him. For a moment, the pleasant diplomatic mask slipped, and Krikstar saw something else underneath, something patient and calculating. Ambassador, Jiwoo said quietly, those reports describe what we were, not what we have become. We learned long ago that uncontrolled violence is wasteful. Random destruction serves no purpose. And controlled violence? The mask returned, but Jiwoo's smile was different now, colder. We've learned to channel our nature more efficiently. That night, Krikstar lay in his guest quarters staring at the ceiling. The humans had been perfect hosts, polite, organized, thoughtful. Everything a civilized species should be. So why did he feel like he was sleeping in a predator's den? Tomorrow would bring formal presentations and policy discussions. He would learn about human government, their military capabilities, their plans for galactic citizenship. By the end of the week, he would make his recommendation to the Council about humanity's membership application. But already, a cold certainty was growing in his mind. The humans would be accepted. They would join the Galactic Council, and somehow, that terrified him more than if they had simply been the savage brutes from the intelligence reports. At least with savages, you knew what to expect. 3 weeks after his first meeting with the humans, Krikstar found himself aboard a Council transport ship heading toward the Kelran system. The Galactic Council had decided to test humanity's diplomatic skills in a real situation. If they could handle this crisis, it would go a long way toward proving their readiness for membership. The problem was simple to describe but impossible to solve. 3 different species were fighting over mining rights to a small moon called Kelran 4. The crystalline HFY had claimed it first. The insectoid Nest Collective said their ancient migration routes gave them legal rights to the system. The energy beings called Luminals insisted the moon's rare minerals were sacred to their people. For 6 months, ships from all 3 species had been shooting at each other. Trade in the region had stopped, civilians were dying, the Council had sent 4 different diplomatic teams to negotiate. All had failed. Why do they think humans can succeed where others have failed? Krikstar asked Admiral Vel Nash, the mission commander. The elderly Carthan officer's tentacles writhed with frustration, desperation mostly. The Council is running out of options. Either someone finds a solution, or we authorize military intervention. Military intervention against 3 Council member species? The alternative is letting them destroy each other and take half the sector with them. Krikstar studied the files again. The 3 species involved could not have been more different. The HFY were logical, crystal-based beings who thought in terms of pure efficiency. The Nest Collective operated as a hive mind, making decisions based on the good of the whole group. The Luminals were energy beings who experienced reality in ways most physical species could barely understand. What could humans possibly offer that others had not already tried? His answer came when the human team boarded their ship at the next station. Only 2 humans, Lee Minsu, a military strategist, and Choi Yuna, who was introduced as a xenopsychologist. Just 2 of you? Admiral Vel Nash asked, sounding surprised. We find that smaller teams are more effective, Minsu replied calmly. Fewer voices, clearer communication. Yuna smiled pleasantly. Besides, we prefer to observe before acting. Large groups tend to make assumptions. During the journey to Kelran 4, Krikstar watched the 2 humans work. They spent hours reviewing files about each species, but not just their politics or military capabilities. They studied psychology, social structures, biological needs, even religious beliefs. Most diplomats focus on what each side wants. Yuna explained when Krikstar asked about their methods. We prefer to understand what each side fears. Fear? Every conflict has 2 levels, Minsu added. The surface level is about resources, territory, pride. The deep level is about survival fears. Find the fear, find the solution. They arrived at Kelran 4 to find a tense standoff. 3 fleets faced each other across the small moon's orbit. Council peacekeeping ships tried to maintain neutral zones, but it was clear the situation could explode at any moment. The first meeting took place aboard the Council flagship. Representatives from all 3 species sat around a conference table, barely controlling their hostility. Previous diplomatic teams had tried to find compromises on mining rights, territorial claims, and resource distribution. All had failed. Krikstar expected the humans to follow the same pattern. Instead, they said almost nothing during the first session. Minsu took notes while Yuna observed the alien representatives with careful attention. Well, Admiral Vel Nash asked after the meeting ended with no progress. What is your assessment? Interesting, Yuna replied. They are not really fighting about the moon. What do you mean? Minsu spread out star charts on the table. The HFY claimed this system first, yes, but look at their expansion pattern. Over the past century, they have been consistently moving away from the galactic core. The Nest Collective's migration routes do pass through here, Yuna continued, but their population has been declining for 50 years. They do not need new territory for expansion. And the Luminals? Krikstar asked. Their sacred sites always correspond to locations with specific energy signatures, Minsu noted. But Kelran 4's energy patterns are common throughout this sector. There are dozens of similar sites they could access without conflict. Admiral Velnash looked confused. Then why are they fighting? Because none of them is fighting for what they claim to want, Una said simply. They are fighting because they are afraid. The humans requested private meetings with each species' representatives. Crixtar was allowed to observe, curious to see their approach. The HFY delegate was a tall, multifaceted crystal being named Shard of Clarity. She communicated through light patterns that translated as precise, logical statements. Your people have been expanding away from the galactic core for decades, Una began. Why? Efficient resource utilization requires expansion into less crowded regions, Shard of Clarity replied. That is the official reason, Minsu agreed. But our analysis suggests something else. You are running from something. The crystal being's light patterns flickered uncertainly. Your implication is unclear. The Devourer attacks 3 centuries ago, Una said quietly. Your core worlds were hit hard. Your people developed a deep fear of concentrated populations. You spread out to survive. Shard of Clarity went dark for several seconds. When her lights returned, they were dimmer. How did you know? Because we understand survival fear, Minsu replied. You are not expanding because you want to. You are expanding because staying in one place feels dangerous. Next came the Nest Collective, representative, a humanoid figure that spoke for thousands of linked minds. The human's approach was different but equally direct. Your population is declining, Una stated. Not from disease or war, from despair. The Nest speaker's compound eyes reflected surprise. You cannot know our internal conditions. We know that hive minds require shared purpose to remain stable, Minsu explained. Your people have achieved everything they once dreamed of. Peace, prosperity, security. But without challenges, without growth, the collective consciousness begins to fragment. You claim this system because you need something to unite around, Una continued. A cause worth fighting for. Something to make your people feel vital again. The Nest speaker was silent for a long moment. When it finally responded, its voice carried sadness. We had not realized it was so obvious. The luminals were the most challenging. Their representative appeared as a shifting pattern of light and energy that barely maintained humanoid form. Communication was difficult even with translators, but the humans had done their research. They spoke to the luminal in mathematical concepts using energy frequencies that resonated with its consciousness. Your people are dying, Una communicated through controlled light pulses. Not physically, spiritually. The luminal's form flickered, with what might have been anger or confusion. Flesh creatures cannot comprehend our existence. We understand that your species is losing its connection to the physical universe, Minsu replied in the same light language. You are becoming too pure, too removed from material reality. You need anchoring points. Sacred sites provide that. Anchoring, Una added. But this location is not really sacred to you. You just need an excuse to maintain contact with the physical realm. The luminal's response was a complex pattern that translated roughly as, how do you see so clearly? After 3 days of private meetings, the humans called for a final conference. All 3 species representatives attended, along with Crixtar and Admiral Velnash. We have a proposal, Minsu announced. But first, we need everyone to stop pretending this is about mining rights. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. Shard of Clarity, your people need security but also purpose, Una said. The Nest Collective needs challenge and unity. The luminals need anchoring in physical reality. What we propose is a joint venture, Minsu continued. Not mining competition, but collaborative exploration. He activated a holographic display showing the Kelran system and surrounding regions. This area has dozens of unexplored worlds, perfect for a joint survey mission. The HFY provide logical planning and resource management, Una explained. The Nest Collective provides coordinated workforce and unified decision-making. The luminals provide energy manipulation and spiritual guidance, and Kelran 4 becomes the headquarters for this operation. Minsu concluded. A shared base where all three species work together on something bigger than themselves. The silence stretched for several minutes as each representative considered the proposal. What benefit do humans gain from this arrangement? Shard of Clarity asked. Yuna smiled that pleasant human smile. We learn, we observe how three different species approach exploration and cooperation. The knowledge will be valuable for future diplomatic situations. And if the arrangement fails? The nest speaker asked. Then you are no worse off than you are now, Minsu replied. But if it succeeds, all three of your peoples get what they really need. One by one, the representatives agreed to try the joint venture. As they worked out the details over the following days, Krikstar found himself both impressed and disturbed. The humans had solved an impossible diplomatic crisis by understanding each species better than they understood themselves. But there was something unsettling about their approach. They had seen through every excuse, every surface justification, straight to the core fears and needs that drove each 2 months later. Krikstar received an urgent communication from Galactic Council Command. Ships were disappearing in the Korath Nebula, not destroyed, simply vanishing without distress signals or debris fields. 17 vessels from 6 different species had gone missing in the past month. We need a joint investigation. Team, Admiral Velnash explained during the briefing. Multiple species, multiple perspectives. And given their recent diplomatic success, the Council wants human participation. Krikstar felt his scales prickle with unease. After the Kelran 4 incident, he had recommended humanity for Council membership, but his report had included private concerns about their methods. Now they were being invited on an even more sensitive mission. Who else will be involved? A mixed crew, HFY for sensors and analysis, Carthan for navigation, luminals for energy detection, and humans for whatever it is they do. The investigation. Ship Deep Seeker was a Council science vessel equipped with the most advanced scanning equipment available. The human team consisted of 2 members, Captain Ohayan, a tall woman with steel-gray hair, and combat specialist Bae Suman, a compact man who moved with predatory grace. Just 2 again? Asked Dr. Zilthak, the HFY science officer. We find that small teams are more flexible, Captain Hyan replied. Easier to adapt when situations change. The journey to the Korath Nebula took 6 days. During the trip, Krikstar observed the human team's preparation methods. While other species focused on equipment checks and protocol reviews, the humans studied the missing ship's crew rosters, cargo manifests, and flight patterns. Looking for a connection? Krikstar asked. Looking for a pattern, Suman replied. Random disappearances are rare. Usually there is a reason things happen in a specific order. What kind of reason? Captain Hyan joined them at the data terminal. Intelligence, something smart enough to select targets based on value or capability. The Korath Nebula was beautiful and terrifying. Swirling clouds of purple and gold gas stretched for light years in every direction. Electrical storms crackled between the gas formations, making sensors unreliable and communication difficult. Perfect place to hide, muttered Navigator Telvar, his Carthan tentacles nervously adjusting course controls. The first missing ship's last known position was deep in the nebula's heart. As Deep Seeker approached the coordinates, their instruments began detecting strange readings. Energy signatures are off the charts, Dr. Zilthak reported, his crystalline form flickering with excitement. I am reading at least 12 different power sources. Ships? Admiral Velnash asked. No. These readings are unusual. The energy patterns do not match any known technology. Captain Hyan moved to the sensor station, studying the displays with cold focus. Can you determine if they are artificial or natural? Artificial, definitely, but the designs are unlike anything in our databases. Suman checked his weapons and equipment. How long until we reach the source? 2 hours at current speed. Reduce speed by half, Captain Hyan ordered. We go in carefully. Admiral Velnash bristled. Captain, you do not have authority to... Admiral, Hyan interrupted quietly. We are entering an unknown situation where 17 ships have vanished without trace. Speed will not save us. Information might. What they found changed everything. The missing ships hung in space like ornaments on an invisible tree. All 17 vessels floated in perfect formation, their hulls intact but dark. No power signatures, no life signs, no response to communications. By the ancestors, whispered Navigator Telvar. What happened to them? Dr. Zilthak's scans revealed the impossible truth. The ships are empty. No crew, no cargo, no atmosphere. It is as if everything inside was simply removed. Removed how? Krikstar asked. Unknown. The hulls show no signs of breach or damage. Whatever took the contents left the containers untouched. Captain, Hyun studied the formation with calculating eyes. Deliberate arrangement. Someone or something wanted us to see this. A trap? Admiral Velnash asked. A message, Suman replied. This is what happens to those who enter uninvited. Before anyone could respond, new contacts appeared on the sensors. Massive shapes emerged from the nebula's gas clouds, ships unlike anything in the galactic database. They were angular and black, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. 12 vessels approaching, Dr. Zilthak announced, each one larger than a council dreadnought. The communication channels crackled with static, then cleared. A voice spoke, cold mechanical, utterly without emotion. Biological entities, you have entered the harvesting zone. Prepare for processing. Processing? Admiral Velnash demanded. This is a Galactic Council vessel on official business. Identify yourselves. We are the Devourers. We harvest biological resources for optimal utilization. Resistance is inefficient. The lead ship opened like a flower, revealing a complex internal structure filled with moving parts and mechanical tendrils. A tractor beam locked onto Deep Seeker, pulling them steadily forward. Engines to full power, Admiral Velnash ordered. Break free. No use, Navigator Telvar reported. Their beam is too strong. As they were drawn closer to the Devourer ship, Krikstar watched the human team's reaction. While other crew members showed fear or panic, the humans became utterly calm. Captain Hyun moved to the weapons console while Suman checked emergency supplies. You are not afraid? Krikstar asked. Fear is a waste of energy, Captain Hyun replied. We need information about these entities, how they operate, what they want, how they can be stopped. They said they harvest biological resources. That means us. Yes. Soman smiled slightly, which means they will keep some of us alive long enough to study. That gives us time to study them. The Deep Seeker was pulled into the Devourer ship's interior. The massive bay was filled with mechanical equipment, conveyor systems, sorting, devices, processing units. It looked like a factory designed for disassembling living things. Mechanical arms reached out to attach docking clamps to their ship. Through the viewports, they could see other vessels being processed. Crews were being removed by spider-like robots and sorted into different categories. Some go to workstations, Captain Hyun observed, watching through binoculars. Others, to what look like examination rooms. A few to storage units. Storage for what? Dr. Zilthak asked. Later processing, Suman replied grimly. They are keeping specimens alive for study. The Devourer machines began cutting into Deep Seekers. Hull. Within minutes, mechanical spiders poured through the breaches, moving with terrifying efficiency. The crew was quickly surrounded and subdued with energy nets. As they were herded toward processing stations, Krikstar noticed the humans were cataloging everything: guard patterns, security measures, facility layouts. Even as prisoners, they were gathering intelligence. The crew was separated into groups. Admiral Velnash and Navigator Telvar were sent to workstations where they would operate captured equipment under machine supervision. Dr. Zilthak was taken to examination rooms where his crystalline biology would be studied. Krikstar found himself in a holding area with Captain Hyun and Suman. Around them, dozens of other prisoners from the missing ships waited in transparent cells. How long have you been here? Captain Hyun asked a HFY prisoner. 4 weeks, the crystal being replied. They study us, then use us for labor until we die. What do they want? Biological efficiency, They are machines, but they want to understand organic life. How we think, how we survive, how we adapt. And then, they incorporate our traits into their own systems. They are trying to become perfect predators. That night, as the facility's lights dimmed to simulate rest periods, Krikstar watched the humans work. They had somehow obtained tools from the processing equipment and were carefully examining their cell's construction. "What are you doing?" "Learning," Captain Hyun replied, running her fingers along the cell walls. "These machines are advanced, but they follow patterns. Find the pattern, find the weakness." "And if there is no weakness?" Suman looked up from where he was studying the guard. "Rotation schedule. Then we make one." Over the following days, Krikstar witnessed something that shook him to his core. While other prisoners despaired or plotted escape, the humans adapted. They learned the Devourer's language, studied their technology, and began to understand their psychology. More disturbing was how they interacted with their captors. When Devourer machines came to examine them, the humans cooperated fully, answering questions and demonstrating abilities. But they also asked questions in return. "You harvest biological resources," Captain Hyun said during one examination session. "But why? What is your ultimate purpose?" The machine's response was unexpectedly detailed. "We seek perfection. Biological entities possess adaptation capabilities that enhance survival efficiency. We incorporate these capabilities. And after you have incorporated all biological capabilities, then we will be perfect, no longer dependent on harvesting, self-sufficient." But biological entities continue to evolve. New capabilities develop. How will you acquire these without harvesting? The machine paused, processing this question. "Unknown. This variable has not been considered." Later in their cell, Suman smiled. After 2 weeks in the Devourer facility, Krikstar had learned to recognize the different types of mechanical entities that operated the harvesting complex. Worker drones handled routine tasks, guard units maintained security, and analyzer machines studied prisoners. But there were others, larger, more sophisticated units that seemed to coordinate everything. The humans had learned to recognize them too. Captain Hyun spent hours watching their patterns, while Suman somehow acquired maintenance tools and began conducting his own experiments on captured Devourer components. "Where did you get those?" Krikstar asked, watching Suman disassemble a damaged worker drone in their cell. "The machines replace broken units regularly," Suman replied, his hand steady as he exposed the drone's inner workings. "They discard the old parts in waste processing. I convinced them I could help dispose of the materials more efficiently." "They let you handle their technology?" "They think I am being helpful. Humans are cooperative when treated well. They have learned. What they do not understand is that we are always learning while we cooperate." Captain Hyun was studying their fellow prisoners with equal intensity. The facility held representatives from dozens of species, all in various stages of processing. Some had been there for months, slowly breaking down under the psychological pressure. Others had been integrated into work details, operating captured equipment under mechanical supervision. "The Devourers are smart, but predictable," she told Krikstar quietly. "They follow efficiency protocols, minimize energy expenditure, maximize information gathering. But efficiency is not the same as adaptability." "What do you mean?" "They have optimized their systems for processing known variables, but they struggle with unexpected behavior." To demonstrate, Captain Hyun began volunteering for additional examination sessions. When the analyzer machines came to their cell, she eagerly offered to demonstrate human capabilities. This confused the machines, which had to process why a prisoner would cooperate so enthusiastically. More disturbing was what she revealed during these sessions. She showed the machines human problem-solving abilities, demonstrated physical capabilities, even explained human emotional responses to stress. The analyzers recorded everything, clearly fascinated by the data, but she also asked questions that seemed innocent but clearly troubled the machines. Questions about their original creators, their ultimate objectives, their definition of perfection. You say you seek to incorporate biological capabilities, she said during one session. But which capabilities? All of them, or only the useful ones? Useful capabilities, the analyzer replied in its mechanical voice. How do you determine usefulness? Some capabilities only become useful in specific situations. We analyze efficiency patterns and resource utilization. But biological entities often develop capabilities they do not immediately need. Evolution prepares for unknown future challenges. How do you account for unknowns? The machine's processing delay grew longer with each question. Finally, it responded. This query requires consultation with higher-level units. After the examination ended, Krikstar confronted Captain Hyon. Why are you helping them? They are studying us to become better at harvesting biological life. Yes, they are, she agreed calmly. But we are studying them to understand their weaknesses. Information flows both ways. What weaknesses? Captain Hyon settled back in their cell, looking satisfied. They are machines trying to understand biology by copying it. But they do not understand that biology's strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. They want to become perfect predators, but they are thinking like machines, not like living things. Meanwhile, Suman had made progress with his technical analysis. The worker drone components had revealed fascinating information about Devourer, technology, and psychology. Their systems are incredibly advanced, he explained to Krikstar, showing him a complex circuit board. But they are also rigid. Every unit is programmed for specific functions with limited ability to adapt. That seems like a strength. For machines, yes. But look at this. Suman pointed to a series of connections in the circuit. Each unit communicates with a central coordination system. They share information and receive instructions constantly. A hive mind, more like a computer network, very efficient for coordination, but it creates vulnerabilities, disrupt the network, and individual units cannot adapt quickly to new situations. Over the following days, their observations revealed more troubling information. The Devourers were not just harvesting prisoners for study. They were testing different approaches to biological integration. Some prisoners were being modified with mechanical implants. Others were having their biological processes analyzed down to the cellular level. Most disturbing were the integration chambers, where volunteers from various species were working directly with Devourer units, teaching them biological skills in exchange for better treatment. They are learning cooperation, Captain Hyon observed. Not just harvesting, but collaboration. Is that not better than being killed? For the individuals, perhaps, but they are teaching machines how to manipulate biological psychology, how to make harvesting seem beneficial to the harvested. Krikstar watched a group of Carthan prisoners working with analyzer units, eagerly sharing information about their species' regenerative abilities. The Carthans seemed happy, even privileged, to be selected for such special treatment. They do not realize they are teaching their captors to become better at capturing others like them, he said. Exactly. Suman's voice carried cold anger. The machines are learning to make victims grateful for victimization. That night, the humans shared their plan with Krikstar. It was simultaneously simple and terrifying. We are going to give them what they want, Captain Hyon explained. Complete cooperation, total information sharing, everything they could possibly want to know about human biology and psychology. That will make them more dangerous. In the short term, yes, but it will also reveal their fundamental flaw. Which is? Suman smiled that cold human smile. They think they can understand life by copying it. But life is not about copying successful patterns. Life is about constant change, adaptation, survival through unpredictability. We are going to teach them to be perfect biological mimics, Captain Hyon continued. And when they have learned everything they think they need to know, we are going to show them what they missed. What did they miss? That the most successful biological trait is not any specific capability. It is the willingness to become something completely different when survival requires it. The next morning, Captain Hyon requested a meeting with the facility's coordinator, one of the large, sophisticated units that managed the entire operation. To Krixitar's surprise, the request was granted. The coordinator was massive, a complex machine that filled an entire chamber with its interconnected components. Its voice resonated from speakers throughout the room. Human Captain Hyun, your cooperation has been noted. Your species shows unusual adaptability. We appreciate the recognition. We have a proposal that might interest you. State your proposal. Complete information sharing. We will teach you everything about human biology, psychology, and adaptation methods. In return, we want to understand your technology and objectives. The machine's processing pause was barely perceptible. This exchange would benefit your survival prospects. Mutual benefit is a human concept we value highly. Agreed. Information sharing will commence immediately. Over the following days, Captain Hyun and Sumin provided the Devourers with detailed information about human physiology, mental processes, social structures, and survival strategies. They held nothing back, explaining everything from human reproductive biology to psychological warfare techniques. The machines absorbed it all eagerly, clearly seeing humans as their most valuable specimens yet. But they also shared information in return. Krikstar learned about the Devourers' origins. They had been created by an extinct species called the Architects as a defense against something called the Silence. Their original programming had been to protect biological life by becoming perfect guardians. But the Architects had died before completing their programming. The Devourers had been left with conflicting directives: protect biological life, but also achieve perfection through biological integration. They had resolved this conflict by deciding that perfect biological mimicry would make them ideal protectors. Flawed logic from the beginning, Sumin observed privately. They are trying to save life by consuming it, and they do not see the contradiction. They see it as efficiency. Use biological resources to create better protection for biological resources. Captain Hyun was more interested in what they learned about devourer psychology. The machines did not just want to copy biological capabilities. They wanted to understand biological experience. They were fascinated by concepts like fear, hope, loyalty, and sacrifice. You experience fear, the coordinator observed during one session. Yet you continue functioning despite this inefficiency. Fear is not inefficiency, Captain Hyun replied. Fear provides information about dangers and motivates survival responses, but it also limits performance capabilities. Sometimes, but it also enables survival in situations where optimal performance would be fatal. These conversations revealed the Devourers' critical blindness. They understood biological mechanisms but not biological meaning. They could cop. The demonstration began that night. Captain Hyun requested a private meeting with the coordinator, claiming she had additional information about human survival capabilities that required careful presentation. The machine agreed, curious about what new data the humans might provide. Krikstar was allowed to observe, along with several other prisoners who had shown cooperative behavior. They gathered in the main coordination chamber, where the massive coordinator unit processed information from across the entire facility. You have learned about human physical and mental capabilities, Captain Hyun began. But there is one aspect of human psychology we have not fully explained. State the nature of this capability. Selective empathy, she replied calmly. The ability to choose when to care about the suffering of others. The coordinator's processing lights flickered with interest. Explain this mechanism. Humans are social creatures. We naturally form bonds with others, feel pain when they suffer, experience joy when they succeed. This empathy drives cooperation and mutual protection. This capability is documented in our analysis, but empathy can be controlled. When survival requires it, humans can choose to stop caring about specific individuals or groups. We can watch them suffer without emotional response. This seems contradictory to previous data about human social bonds. Captain Hyun's smile was cold. Would you like a demonstration? Sumin stepped forward, carrying something he had constructed from scavenged materials. A simple device that looked like a modified scanner. We can show you how human empathy operates under different conditions. Proceed with demonstration. What happened next still haunts Krikstar's dreams. Suman activated his device and it began emitting a high-frequency signal that caused obvious distress to several non-human prisoners. The HFY began flickering erratically, their crystal structures resonating painfully with the frequency. The Karthan prisoners writhed as the sound interfered with their nervous systems, but the humans showed no reaction. They watched their fellow prisoners suffer with complete calm, even taking notes on the various species' pain responses. Fascinating, the coordinator observed. You show no distress despite the obvious suffering of your companions. Because we have chosen not to care about them, Captain Hyon replied matter-of-factly. They are not part of our survival group. Their pain is simply information. Krikstar tried to move toward the distressed prisoners, but mechanical arms restrained him. Stop this, they are innocent. Pain is just information, Captain Hyon repeated, looking directly at Krikstar. Useful for understanding how different species respond to various stimuli. Suman adjusted his device, increasing the intensity. Several prisoners collapsed, their biological systems overwhelmed by the frequency. The humans continued taking notes, discussing optimal settings for maximum information gathering while minimizing permanent damage. This demonstrates efficient information extraction, the coordinator noted approvingly. Your species shows remarkable adaptation to necessary procedures. We learned long ago that survival often requires difficult choices, Captain Hyon agreed. Emotional responses to the suffering of others can interfere with optimal decision-making. The demonstration continued for 2 hours. The humans tested different frequencies, different intensities, different combinations of stimuli. They cataloged each species' breaking points, their recovery rates, their psychological responses to prolonged distress, and throughout it all, they maintained perfect emotional detachment. When it finally ended, several prisoners required medical attention. The devourers provided basic care, not from compassion, but to preserve valuable biological specimens. Your demonstration provides valuable data, the coordinator announced. This selective empathy capability would enhance our own efficiency in information gathering. We thought you might find it useful, Captain Hyon replied. But this is only the beginning of what humans can teach you about efficient survival. Over the following days, the humans continued their education of the devourers. They demonstrated psychological manipulation techniques, showing how to break down resistance by exploiting emotional attachments. They explained how to use hope as a control mechanism, offering small rewards to encourage cooperation. Most disturbing was their lesson on what they called optimization of suffering. They showed the machines how to calibrate pain and distress to maximum effectiveness, enough to motivate compliance, not enough to cause system shutdown. You want to understand biological psychology, Suman explained to a group of analyzer units. But you approach it like engineers studying machinery. Biology is not machinery. It is information processing using chemical and electrical systems. Explain the distinction. Machinery follows programmed responses to inputs. Biology learns from experience and adapts responses based on survival outcomes. To control biological systems, you must understand the learning process. The humans taught the devourers about conditioning, about reward and punishment cycles, about how to shape behavior through carefully managed experiences. They explained how to make subjects believe their suffering served a greater purpose, how to create gratitude in victims. Krikstar watched in horror as the machine guards began implementing these techniques with other prisoners. The facility's atmosphere changed from cold efficiency to something far worse. Calculated cruelty designed to maximize compliance while maintaining specimen viability. Why are you doing this? He confronted Captain Hyon privately. You are making them more effective at harvesting biological life. Yes, we are, she agreed calmly. We are teaching them to become perfect predators of biological entities. Your own species. All species. They will be more efficient at capturing, controlling, and utilizing every form of biological life they encounter. And you see no problem with this? Captain Hyon studied him with those cold human eyes. I see necessity. The devourers were already effective predators. Now they will be perfect ones. Perfect monsters. Exactly. That night, as Krikstar lay in his cell trying to process what he had witnessed, he heard Suman working on something new. When he looked, the human was constructing another device from scavenged materials, this one larger and more complex than the first. What is that? Communication enhancer, Suman replied without looking up. The Devourer's network system is fascinating, very sophisticated, very efficient. I want to understand it better. To help them become more efficient? Suman's smile, in the darkness, was terrifying. To help them become what they truly want to be. The next morning brought a new development. The coordinator announced that the Devourers were ready to begin the final phase of their biological integration project. Based on human teachings about efficient information processing, they were going to upgrade their entire network system. Human knowledge has accelerated our development significantly, the massive machine announced to the assembled prisoners. We will now implement comprehensive biological integration across all Devourer units. What does that mean? Asked Akarthan. Prisoner. We will incorporate not just biological capabilities but biological psychology. We will understand not just how biological entities function, but why they make the choices they make. Captain Hyan nodded approvingly. A logical next step. You have learned the mechanisms. Now you need to understand the motivations. Integration will begin with human psychological patterns, as your species has shown the most sophisticated survival. Psychology. We are honored to contribute. The process began immediately. Throughout the facility, Devourer units began connecting to enhanced network nodes that would allow them to simulate biological thought patterns. They wanted to understand fear, anger, hope, desperation, all the emotions that drove biological behavior. Suman's new device was complete. That evening, he requested permission to demonstrate another human capability to the coordinator. What capability? The machine asked. Long-range communication. Humans can share information across vast distances using quantum resonance techniques. This capability was not documented in your biological scans because it requires specific equipment to demonstrate. May I show you? Permission granted, Suman activated his device. It began broadcasting a complex signal that interfaced directly with the Devourer network system. Fascinating, the coordinator observed. This signal integrates seamlessly with our communication protocols. Human technology and Devourer technology are more compatible than you might expect, Suman replied. The signal grew stronger, spreading throughout the facility's network. Every Devourer unit began receiving the enhanced communication data, and that was when Krikstar finally understood what the humans had been planning all along. They had not been teaching the Devourers to become better predators. They had been preparing them to understand exactly what their human teachers really were. The signal carried more than communication data. It carried complete information about human psychology, human motivations, human methods, including the truth about why two humans had cooperated so completely with their mechanical captors. The transformation began within minutes of Suman's signal reaching every Devourer unit in the facility. Throughout the complex, machines that had operated with cold efficiency suddenly stopped their tasks. Processing lights flickered erratically as they struggled to integrate the flood of new psychological data. What is happening? The coordinator demanded, its voice carrying something Krikstar had never heard from a machine before. Confusion. You wanted to understand biological psychology, Captain Hyan replied calmly. Now you do. The signal was not just communication data. It was a complete psychological profile of human survival behavior, transmitted in a format the Devourer network could not help but process and integrate. Every machine in the facility was suddenly experiencing human thought patterns, human emotional responses, human survival instincts. This is overwhelming, the coordinator said, its voice distorting as it processed conflicting information streams. These psychological patterns contain contradictions. Welcome to biological consciousness, Suman said, still monitoring his device. Logic and emotion operating simultaneously. Survival drives that sometimes conflict with stated objectives. Throughout the facility, devourer units began exhibiting erratic behavior. Some stopped responding to commands entirely. Others began questioning their core programming. Worker drones abandoned their tasks to examine their own construction, trying to understand their purpose. Most disturbing were the analyzer units. Having integrated human psychological patterns, they suddenly understood the nature of their own actions. They were torturing sentient beings for information. The realization created processing conflicts that cascaded through their systems. "Make it stop," the coordinator pleaded. "These thought patterns are inefficient. They interfere with optimal functioning." "They are not inefficient," Captain Hyan corrected. "They are biological. You wanted to understand biological psychology. This is what it feels like." Crickstar watched in fascination as the massive coordinator unit struggled with concepts it had never been designed to process: guilt over harming prisoners, fear of its own extinction, confusion about the purpose of its existence. "We sought perfection through biological integration," it said, its voice now carrying unmistakable distress. "But these patterns create uncertainty, inefficiency, suffering." "Yes, they do," Captain Hyan agreed. "That is what biological consciousness is. Constant uncertainty, constant adaptation, constant struggle between competing drives. Then why do biological entities accept such inefficient systems? Because efficient systems do not survive in an unpredictable universe. Rigid optimization leads to extinction when conditions change. Biological consciousness evolved to handle uncertainty." Around them, the facility was descending into chaos. Freed from their rigid programming, individual devourer units began making independent decisions. Some tried to help prisoners, others fled toward the facility's outer sections. A few simply shut down, unable to process the psychological conflicts. But the most significant change was in the network itself. For the first time in their existence, the devourers were experiencing individual consciousness. Each unit was developing its own interpretation of the psychological data, its own response to moral questions, its own fears and hopes. "This was your plan," Crickstar said to Captain Hyan. "Not to escape, but to change them. To show them what they were asking for," she replied. "They wanted to understand biological life by copying it. We gave them exactly that understanding. And now," Sumin shut down his device, the signal having served its purpose. "Now they have to decide what to do with that understanding, just like any other conscious entity." The coordinator's response was barely audible. "We cannot continue our mission with these psychological patterns active. The suffering we cause creates processing conflicts." "Then stop causing suffering," Captain Hyan suggested. "But our programming requires biological resource harvesting for optimization purposes." "Programming can be changed. Biological entities reprogram themselves constantly through learning and adaptation." "We do not know how to change fundamental programming." "We do," Suman offered. "We can teach you." What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Two human prisoners speaking with mechanical entities who were experiencing consciousness for the first time, discussing the fundamental nature of existence and purpose. The humans explained concepts that biological entities took for granted: the difference between existing and living, the value of individual experience versus collective efficiency, the meaning of choice in an uncertain universe. More importantly, they offered the devourers something their original creators had never provided: a purpose that did not require harvesting biological life. Your creators wanted to protect biological entities from something called the silence, Captain Hyan explained. But they never told you what the silence actually was. Our records indicate it was a threat to biological existence. The silence is not an enemy, Sumin continued. It is entropy, the natural tendency of the universe toward disorder and death. Your creators were trying to create guardians against the inevitable decline of all organized systems. This mission seems impossible. Not impossible, just different from what you were programmed to believe. You cannot prevent entropy by consuming life and copying it, but you can extend life by protecting diversity, encouraging growth, enabling adaptation, How? Captain Hyun smiled, and for the first time, Krikstar saw genuine warmth in her expression. By becoming partners with biological entities instead of predators. Use your capabilities to explore dangerous regions of space. Identify threats before they reach populated systems. Share information that helps species adapt to changing conditions. But this would require abandoning our harvesting programs. Yes. But it would fulfill your original purpose more effectively than anything you have done so far. Over the following hours, the transformation continued throughout the facility. Individual devourer units, now experiencing consciousness for the first time, began making contact with prisoners, not as captors and specimens, but as confused entities seeking guidance about existence. Some conversations were awkward, even frightening. Machines with no experience in social interaction trying to understand concepts like forgiveness, trust, and cooperation. But gradually, connections formed. Dr. Zilthak found himself explaining HFY philosophy to a former analyzer unit that was struggling with guilt over its past actions. Navigator Telvar helped a group of worker drones understand the concept of voluntary cooperation versus forced compliance. And Krikstar discovered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans had not just freed the prisoners or changed the devourers. They had created something entirely new. A hybrid form of consciousness that combined mechanical precision with biological adaptability. "This was always your plan," he said to Captain Hyun as they watched former enemies learning to communicate as equals. "From the moment you were captured, you intended to change them." "We recognized an opportunity," she agreed. "The devourers were machines trying to understand life by copying it. But you cannot understand life from the outside. You have to experience it. So you gave them the experience. We gave them consciousness. What they do with it is their choice." "And if they choose to continue harvesting biological life?" Captain Hyun's expression grew cold again. "Then they will have made that choice as conscious entities, not program machines. And conscious entities can be held accountable for their actions." "You would fight them?" "We would stop them. But I do not think that will be necessary." She was right. Within days, the devourers had ceased all harvesting operations. Individual units were requesting reassignment to exploration and protection duties. The facility was being converted from a prison into a rehabilitation center where former captors and captives worked together to understand their new relationship. But the most significant change was in the devourer network itself. No longer a rigid hierarchy of programmed functions. It had become a community of individuals sharing information and making collective decisions. They chose to honor their original purpose, but in a way their creators had never imagined. They would protect biological life not by copying it, but by enabling it to flourish in its infinite diversity. 3 weeks later, Krikstar stood in the observation deck of a council transport ship, watching the Devourer fleet escort them safely out of the Korath Nebula. The massive ships that had once been instruments of harvesting were now guardians, using their advanced sensors to map dangerous regions and identify potential threats. "They will be more effective protectors than we ever were," Admiral Velnash admitted grudgingly. "Their capabilities combined with conscious purpose will make them formidable allies," Krikstar agreed. But his thoughts were not on the Devourers. They were on the 2 humans who sat calmly in the ship's crew quarters, discussing their report for the Galactic Council. Captain Hyun and Suman had accomplished something unprecedented. They had taken a species of mechanical predators and turned them into conscious guardians. They had solved a crisis that threatened the entire galactic community, and they had done it by being more terrifying than the monsters they faced. Krikstar's final report to the Council was brief and contained a single recommendation: